Hello, welcome back to my channel, guys. I am sorry that I missed last week's video. I was up in New Hampshire visiting my brother and his family, and if you follow me on Instagram, you know just how obsessed I am with his twin babies. My niece and nephew are just the sweetest angels on earth. Ugh, love them. So needless to say, YouTube kind of took a back seat last week. When I came back from my little trip, I just needed to get my life together. I had some work to catch up on, and you know when you come back from a vacation and you feel like your life is in shambles? Well, that's what I felt like, so I didn't get to a video, but here we are. It's Monday and we're filming a new video. So I recently got a comment that I thought would be a really great topic for a video. ZS commented, hello ZS. Suggestions please. I love going to BJJ, but I find it hard to remember the combinations. I started a few months ago and I get frustrated because I can't quite remember the combos when the teacher demonstrates, and when I roll, it's hard to actually implement the techniques in real time. I feel like I've forgotten the moves, can't recall them under pressure. I feel like drilling helps a lot though. My training partners are also super helpful and sweet and help me during rolls, but I'm afraid they'll get impatient with me, and I'm starting to get impatient with myself. Ain't that the truth? Jiu-Jitsu is hard as heck. All right, so first things first, you are not alone. That is the biggest thing that I want to get across here, is you are not the only person training jiu-jitsu that feels like this. Every single other person I think who has ever trained jiu-jitsu feels like this. And those training partners that you said are so helpful and so sweet to you and that you're kind of afraid of them getting impatient, they are literally feeling the same thing. They have been where you are, and honestly, they're probably still feeling like that, where they can't remember things and things are super hard to execute in a roll. If you've only been training for a few months, you are still so new. So give yourself grace, give yourself some time. And I know you said you're growing impatient with yourself, but try to get a little bit more patient with yourself, just a little bit longer. In jiu-jitsu, a couple months is such a little amount of time compared to the grand scheme of jiu-jitsu, and hopefully, you know, every person that trains for the rest of their lives. So only training for a couple months is just such a short amount of time. Give yourself grace. I can't say enough just how normal it is to not be able to remember techniques, movements, steps of the movement, and not being able to execute them during a roll. And then the next very important thing that I want to get across here is I don't know if this ever actually ends. Each belt rank presents its own new set of challenges every time you get promoted, but I think the challenge that forever stays throughout every single belt is remembering what you learn and being able to efficiently and effectively execute that technique in a live roll. The thing is that at white belt and sometimes even at blue belt, you're still learning these movements, but kind of like the very basic forms of these movements. And the more technical you get, the higher in the ranks you go, the more detailed these movements get. And to be honest, I never really realized that until I started training at my current school, where I feel like everything that I learned was not right. And obviously things vary from coach to coach, from school to school, but there were just so many tiny details in all of these movements that I had learned in my old school that I just wasn't aware of and that I just wasn't really taught. For example, in maybe your beginner class or your fundamentals class, you may learn how to do, I don't know, a basic armbar, but then in the advanced class, you're gonna learn tiny little details that you'll be able to comprehend better when you're more advanced versus when you're just a beginner. Hi, puppy. Roxy's joining us today. So I guess this point isn't really that helpful, but what I'm trying to say is the more advanced you become, the more details that you learn and the more that those tiny details matter in a technique. So just remember that everyone, no matter who they are, is always learning and quite honestly, is always struggling. You will forever just be learning, adapting, adjusting, and just trying to figure things out. And then as far as remembering techniques during a live roll, that is totally normal. And I promise the more that you practice those techniques, it will be easier to execute them effectively in a roll. And like you said, drilling will 100% help with that. The more reps that you can get in with a technique, the more times that you can do it, your body's going to remember how to do it, your brain is going to understand how to do it, and you will be able to correctly do it in a roll when you're under a lot more pressure. The thing with drilling and why it can feel feel like you're doing a movement so well when you're drilling it, and then when you're in a live roll, you just can't seem to figure it out, is when you're drilling, your partner is giving you just enough resistance, just enough weight, just enough energy to help you do the movement. Your partner is helping you. Because what would be the point of drilling if you can't nail the technique down in kind of slow motion? So it is completely different when you're rolling and your partner is giving you 100 times more resistance, 100 times more energy. It's very different. But I promise, the more you drill a move, and not only drill it in slow motion, but the more that you try it out in a roll, the more that you fail, the more that you mess up the technique, I promise one day it will click and you'll surprise yourself when you actually pull it off. You'll be like, wow, it actually works. So kind of a quick example that recently happened to me with drilling and repping out a technique is last week in Nogi, every single day we worked on the same movement. We worked from inside De La Hiva, spinning underneath to what's called Kiss of the Dragon, and then eventually we get the back take. When I first learned it and those first couple of reps, I was just kind of figuring out how to move my body and where it was supposed to go. All the tiny little details that my coach showed really weren't in the forefront of my head because I was just trying to figure out where my body was supposed to move. And then once the movement became smoother, the more that I repped it out. And then by Friday, the last day that we did it, I guess for once in my life, I actually did a technique right. My coach came over and he was like, see how easy it is after a full week of doing it? And I was like, you're right. So that just kind of shows getting those reps in, getting that time with the technique will absolutely be beneficial. Can I pull it off in a roll yet? No, but if I keep trying, one day, maybe not today, probably not tomorrow, probably not anytime soon, I will be able to do it in a roll. All right, so what are some tips that you can take away from this to help you remember the techniques that you learn and that will help you one day be able to do them when you're rolling live? First thing is, if you can, if your coach allows it, film the technique that he or she is teaching. So after class, you can look back at the video, you can look back at the technique that your coach taught, and that might help you remember what you learned a little bit easier. I mean, how many times do we learn something? We learn something new almost every day. That is so much information for our brain to process every single day, and to actually remember all of the steps and all of the details, it's so hard. And to have that little extra bit of information saved so that you can look back on it is really beneficial. Probably the amount of techniques that I've been taught that have just flew out of my head, who knows? Another thing that you can do that may help you is write down the technique that your coach taught. Try to write down as many details and as many steps as you can remember. Writing things down, I think, helps you remember things. And again, you're able to look back at your notes and remember what you've learned. And another little piece of advice for writing down the technique is don't just write down, August 23rd, 2021, I learned how to do an armbar from close guard. No, what is that gonna do? Break down the movement. Write down, how do you break down their posture? How do you trap the arm? Once you trap the arm, and maybe for me, I like to grab the cross collar, then what do you do? All these tiny little details that are very easy to forget when you're just learning a movement. So it's really helpful for you to have them all written down. And the last little piece of advice I have for you to help you remember techniques is to film your rolls. It is so helpful to have someone film your rolls, or if you just put your phone up against the wall or something, because the amount of times that you forget what you're doing in a roll, it's insane. When I come home from training and I tell my fiance how training was, when he asks me what I've done in a roll, I may tell him, oh, I did this, and this, but this happened and I couldn't figure this out. Okay, well, how did you get there and what couldn't you figure out? Like, what didn't you do and how did you get caught there? And I'll be like, I don't know, I don't remember. But if I had that roll filmed, and I'm not saying to film every single roll that you do in class every single day, like that's a lot, but once in a while, it's definitely super helpful. If I would have had it filmed, I would have been able to show him, or I would have been able to look back on it myself and been able to remember what the heck I was talking about. And then just a little add-on for that, if you're a competitor, filming your rolls when you compete is so important. That I would film every single time you compete. Every roll, every match, every time you compete, I think is so helpful. Filming your rolls, filming your matches, is really gives you a great opportunity to go back and see where you're getting stuck, what you're doing wrong. And this kind of goes back to breaking down the movement. So if you're trying to execute that armbar from close guard and okay, you've broken their posture, you've trapped the arm, and then maybe you can't seem to adjust your body, you'll be able to see, okay, maybe you are not putting the foot in the hip, you're not creating that angle for you to really get that armbar finish. You'll be able to see, okay, I'm not getting the proper angle to fully extend the arm, I'm not fully trapping the elbow. You know, whatever detail it is that you're missing, looking back on the roll and seeing it live is so helpful, and you'll be able to see exactly where you get stuck. So that's all I got for you today. I hope this video was helpful for you guys. I hope ZS, I answered your question. The biggest thing is just remember that this is completely normal what you're going through. Every other single person in the training room is going through the exact same thing, and I promise no one's going to get frustrated with you and lose their patience with you. The best thing that you can possibly do is to keep showing up for training, keep going. It's only gonna get harder, but it's only gonna get better. If you found this video helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed to my channel, subscribe to my channel. And until the next video, I will see you guys next time.